Something else that Hooker did that sometimes we don't understand is he formalizes the intelligence gathering operation for the Army of the Potomac. Prior to this, military intelligence was very haphazard, to the degree where they would rely on anybody that happened to walk into headquarters and tell them something like, oh, there seems to be a lot of enemy over yonder, and the general would say, thank you, we will react accordingly. They would try to read newspapers. The things that they relied on for their intelligence were pretty laughable. McClellan uses the Pinkerton Detective Agency to be his intelligence. That turns out poorly for the agency and for McClellan. So Hooker wants to change that. So he creates something called the Bureau of Military Information. This is a military entity supervised by Army officers. Again, there really are no intelligence officers at that time, but he finds some officers, infantry officers or otherwise, that are capable, smart guys. The most notable is Colonel George Sharp of a New York regiment, and puts them in a capacity where they will now target, Hooker will tell them, this is what I want to know. They will then figure out a way to go ahead and find that information and then process it, corroborate it, write reports that could be used by the command of the Army. That's going to make things a lot more beneficial for Hooker when he wants to go ahead and make plans. So the way they might do this is find a Union soldier who is from the South and familiar with this area. Dress them in captured Confederate uniforms. Send them through the lines and tell them this is exactly what we want to know. And then when they return, take their information and compare it to other information that is already obtained by the Army. They would rely on the balloons. Someone asked that before, all right? The tough thing with the balloons, it has to be ideal weather conditions. Today would not be a day to put a balloon up. But as long as you have those ideal weather conditions, you put a balloon up, and yes, you can see for as far as the visibility would be on any given day. Now, remember, once the Army start operating in this area known as the wilderness, that becomes a little bit dicey because you can't see into the thickets and all. But other than that, you can pretty much scope out enemy positions, campfires, things of that nature. And then something else that the Bureau of Military Information relied upon heavily were spies. Ideally, you would find people living in this area who had Unionist sentiments, all right, civilians among the population, and engage them in various ways. They're trying to basically undermine the Confederacy's military efforts, and Isaac Silver was one of those. Now, Isaac Silver is 52 years old. He was known as the old man in a lot of the reports when the Bureau, I don't think they were doing that to try to keep it secret, that was just the way that they described him. He was born in New Jersey, and maybe that has a little bit to do with why he decided to help out the United States. He moved down here in the 1850s. I could not determine what specifically drove him to make this choice to go ahead and help the Army of the Potomac, but records indicate that he was kind of upper middle class. He was pretty well off, but did not own any slaves. So that might play a part in his decision. At the beginning of one of his reports to General Hooker, he prefaced it with this statement, which might sum it up. He said, "I feel glad to have the privilege of giving all the information that I can to support a cause worthy of support, the preservation of the Union." Now, he uses the same word twice in this. Isaac Silver had very bad grammar, and it's tough when you read some of his reports. Spellings phonetically, what he's trying to say, trying to turn a phrase, but they were able to discern quite a bit from what he supplied. He also owned a property in Orange County, so he had an excuse for going from here out to Orange pretty frequently, and he could lay eyes on fords, dispositions of the Army of Northern Virginia all the way from Fredericksburg westward, and that's what Hooker really needed to know in order to get his army across to the south side of the river. Isaac Silver paid the price for his actions. He was, towards the end of the war, discovered, arrested, and imprisoned in Richmond. So anybody that did this did so at a pretty big risk for their safety, their family, their property. Again, plays or says something for them making this choice, which is not easy. Isaac Silver was helped pretty dramatically by another gentleman by the name of Ebenzer McGee. He lived pretty close to where we are right now, close today where Riverbend High School is, so maybe less than a mile to our east. Ebenzer McGee was 33 years old. His family had lived in Virginia since the turn of the century. There's another McGee family home that's out in the distance there where the copse of trees is. And he had 4 siblings. Ebenzer and 3 of his brothers all sided with the Union. 2 of them served in the United States Army. 2 of them served as scouts and spies. Again, unsure what inspired their actions, but according to his son, Ebenzer was opposed to slavery. He served as a messenger for Silver's reports. So Silver had an excuse to go between here and Orange. Ebenzer McGee had an excuse to go across the river because he was working up at Aquia, I believe, on the military railroad. So that he had he has to go back and forth. He would carry these reports in the open. He would just fold them up and put them in his pocket. From what we can tell, they're in the National Archives today. There wasn't any coding or any attempt to obscure them. McGee paid heavily for his efforts to help the United States. He was mortally wounded while serving as a scout for Dahlgren's raid down towards Richmond to try to capture or assassinate Confederate President Jefferson Davis later in the war. But both those men made some very significant contributions to Hooker's plans. They did so at great risk to themselves. What did they supply? They told Hooker and the Bureau of Military Information unit locations and strength down to the brigade level for the Army of Northern Virginia, especially the divisions of Hood and Pickett, which had been detached before this campaign down to the Norfolk area. If you look in your handout, there is a table that was put together by the Bureau of Military Information. A lot of the information on that table was derived from the reports of Isaac Silver delivered by Ebenzer McGee. And you look at the numbers, they're getting down to within just a few hundreds of what we now know to be very accurate dispositions for those formations. It also focused Isaac Silver, what were the defenses at the different ford areas, how many Confederates were there. It might help us better appreciate why General Hooker felt pretty confident going into this campaign. It'd be warranted because he's got spies on the other side providing this information. His bureau is processing it, and they're targeting, other information that they need. It gives him a pretty whole picture of what to expect.